I'm always looking for an excuse to feature the Tier 8 German premium destroyer Elbing on the channel, and with the January 2026 update, I was very happily given an excuse. The Elbing, you could say, received a bit of a buff in this update. Not a direct buff that actually modified any of the ship parameters, an indirect buff in the form of the addition of a new destroyer commander for the French. That would be, of course, Chuck, whose name I don't want to attempt to pronounce because I'm going to butcher it, but you're all familiar with who that is, I'm sure. Chuck is the destroyer gunboat commander for the French line. We've already tested him out on the Marceau. I think I've tested him out on the Kleber too and found him to be pretty good for that ship, even though I don't think I've actually put a video on YouTube to that effect. That'll be coming in the next few weeks, I'm sure. Anyway, Chuck provides a main battery range buff in the form of a 3% buff, and in addition to that, when he's fully maxed, he also provides a 4% buff to damage output to destroyers. An Elbing as a ship is more of a mini light cruiser without a citadel than it is a typical destroyer. Mostly what you want to do is shoot armor piercing from its excellent main battery guns because they have such crazy pen. They can often citadel cruisers, especially light cruisers, even at far distances. But the problem with Elbing is that, well, like most content in World of Warships Legends, most ships that is, Elbing is downstream of World of Warships PC. It was designed originally for that game, and then eventually it made its way to Legends, just like pretty much everything else does. And when it did make its way to Legends, it got what I like to call the Legends treatment. Legends treatment is a neutral term. It can mean that the ship got really spiced up by the Legends dev team, or it can mean the ship got neutered. And unfortunately, Elbing's main battery gun range was completely botched in the translation from PC to Legends. I believe this thing has a main battery range base of something like 10.2 or 10.3 kilometers, which is really unfortunate, especially considering the Tier 8 tech tree German destroyer Schultz of essentially the same line has a much longer base main battery range, and I think you can quite comfortably build it to reach 14 or 15 kilometers. Not so on the Elbing. I'll show you the build here as the action wears down a bit, and somebody in a comment on an old video yesterday that I noticed did mention nobody likes to show their mods. So I'm going to make that right when I show you this commander build, and I think I'll be able to show you the mods moving forward. We've got Aiming Systems Mod 1, Propulsion Mod, Concealment, and in the fourth slot, we've got the main battery range mod, but the epic version that will increase the main battery range for every 30,000 damage we do. And I think that's helpful to the Elbing, although I'd much prefer to run the reload mod. It's just if we go that route, we can't maximize the range, and I feel like you need to on this ship. But as for the commander, it's Eric Bai, and you'll notice the inspirations are Rumble and this new Chuck guy. So Rumble and Chuck together, this gives you the ultimate range buff on any destroyer build that you can create. Without Chuck as one of the inspirations, I got the Elbing main battery range up to 13.4 kilometers. That is, by the way, with the epic battle flag in the fourth flag slot too, so keep that in mind. But with Chuck, we go from 13.4 kilometers to 13.7. That's right, 0.3. It's not exactly a earth-shattering buff. It's not going to be breaking any records anywhere, but a little bit of extra range on the Elbing is nice. In fact, what I wish Wargaming would do, since they did not choose to put this ship at the legendary tier where it belongs, is give Elbing a main battery range buff. I don't know why its range is so low at base, especially with the Schultz. I suppose the justification for that could be that, well, these torpedoes, you know, they have longer range than the Schultz. I think they're 13 km and the Schultz has 8 km torps. So we've got better torpedo power, less main battery power. But look at that Minotaur over there. You see, the Citadels were getting on him with the main battery guns. This is the Elbing's bread and butter. And the Elbing is capable of this kind of damage even at longer ranges than that. In this battle, I think, if memory serves me correctly, we are only going to end up hitting one torpedo. And the way Elbing's currently configured, as you can see with Eric By at the helm, well, maybe you can't see it because I'm in a smoke screen, but I've got a sea detectability range of 5.3 kilometers. All I have is the concealment mod and then Eric By at the helm. That's it. Eric By is, of course, the optimal commander for this thing because he's really the only German destroyer gunboat commander that we have. And well, I don't think Elbing needs to be this concealed. I would be very happy if they gave the concealment a nerf and simultaneously buffed the main battery range. I think a lot of people try to play Elbing as more of a torpedo boat. At least that's my observations when I see them out in the wild. And I don't think you want to do that. Again, I don't think these torpedoes are the main draw here. They might have long range, they might hit decently hard, but they're fairly slow. And the main battery guns, as you saw against the Minotaur, are just so powerful that I think you want to be using them most of the time. On top of that, I think I've explained this before, but there seems to be this perception in the community that, well, at least among some members of the community, that torpedo boats are kind of a big problem, a big threat. Maybe torpedo boats are part of the meta. I don't know how you would define the meta in this game. It seems to be just potato on potato to my eyes. But the bottom line here is that whenever you launch torpedoes, they have to sail in a straight line across a certain distance before they ever reach the target. And, depending on the range, the target may have somewhere between 30 or 60 seconds to change their course, change their speed, and one little alteration in either of those things can easily make a full salvo of torpedoes miss whatever target you launch them at. So you require, to some degree, a bit of luck to get torpedo hits. You have to assume that whoever you're shooting at or whoever you're launching torpedoes at isn't going to maneuver out of the way of the torpedoes before they make contact. And that's why you tend to not get so many torpedo hits. You certainly don't get as many torpedo hits as you do compared to main battery hits every time you're firing the guns. You're going to land shells in pretty much every salvo unless you're really bad at aiming. And ultimately, guns are more reliable, less reliant on luck, and what you need, as you can see there against the Laffy, to take out enemy destroyers. And, you might think Elbing as a sort of light cruiser without a citadel, you might think it's not great at taking out enemy destroyers, but especially with Chuck at the helm, the damage on this destroyer caliber AP was always impressive against other DDs. But now that it's got this 4% buff from Chuck, well, it's even more impressive. You saw that 4,000 damage salvo against the Laffy, and I think we had a couple others against other destroyers. Speaking of which, there's still one destroyer left alive in this game. Both Aki and Michelangelo are backing off while we've got a battleship headed toward our base. And there's also a cruiser out on the other side of the map who's probably coming toward that area. And we don't know where the last final enemy destroyer is. We just know it's a Shimakaze. I think it might have been last spotted somewhere near the center of the map. And in fact, it's by our base. Exactly where you would think it would be at this point in the battle, with, I can't actually tell how many minutes left there are to go, but a couple of them, and it's a 4v5 in favor of the Reds. They're going to get into the base. We do have some ships in position to defend, but we're going to need to go over there and take care of the Shimakaze ourselves. He could theoretically at least go dark and cap the base before these guys can actually take him out. For some reason he's spotted. I don't know if that's because the cruiser or the battleship right there to the right-hand side of the screen have radar. They might. I can't quite tell what they are. I think that cruiser might be in Alaska or something. Anyway, the Shimakaze goes dark, so we really are going to have to get in here and take care of him. The Conqueror, though, is a bit of a scary opponent. Well, there's Shima spotted again. I don't know what's going on. Is he shooting his main battery guns at these guys for no reason? Maybe he's trying to throw the game. Oh no, he is radared by the cruiser. Not his fault, I suppose. It was the Alaska, but the Alaska goes down to the Shimakaze torpedoes as we unexpectedly hit one singular torpedo that we launched ages ago. These torpedoes are slow, another reason I don't think they're the main draw on the Elbing. But Shimakaze, he's got no HP, he's dark. As soon as we spot him, he's going to go down. We're probably going to outspot him too. Or he's going to outspot us, rather, but not by much, considering our concealment is 5.3. The big problem, though, is this mostly healthy Conqueror who will be able to blap us with HE if we're spotted by Shima, which we are instantly. Shima's going to be a one-shot kill. There he goes, and that's 3 kills. We can smoke up now, and thankfully, this is insane, but the Conqueror shoots armor piercing at us. What a crazy thing. You would expect Conquerors to be shooting HE all the time, but I don't know, maybe he had broadsides on that Alaska or this other battleship and he was shooting AP. Perhaps it was the proper choice for him. Anyway, we've got torpedoes headed his way. He was reversing into their path, but I do think he's going to be able to go forward and maybe avoid all of them. They are very slow. And did he just switch to HE there and shoot at the battleship instead of me? Something is spotting me with sonar. Likely one of the enemy cruisers came back in this direction and he's got me caught. Anyway, there you go. The torpedoes completely miss Conqueror, even at point-blank range, because they are so slow, and we didn't account for him to go forward, so it's the guns that ultimately take him out. And what do you know? It is the Ibuki over there, who's pristine and full HP. Not anymore, though. Ibuki might be a heavy cruiser, but even with heavy cruiser-grade armor, and I realize there's probably not that much of a difference regularly between light and heavy cruiser armor. The heavy cruiser designation refers to the size of the guns, not the thickness of the armor, but even something like the Ibuki, the Elbing can chew right through that belt armor and hit the Citadel 3 times. That is 12 Citadels in this game. In fact, if you ever get any of those missions that require you to get Citadel hits, I think a lot of people like to use battleships for that purpose. But I think you want something that can fire more quickly. The Elbing would be a good candidate for completing those missions. You just need to hope that the matchmaker blesses you with a couple of cruisers on the enemy team that you can Citadel. And you can Citadel a lot of them. The Minotaur, the Ibuki, whatever. In any case, our torpedoes have been damaged. We've lost 1 torpedo tube completely. And that is unfortunate. Or did we not? Yeah, we did. I think we lost 1 torpedo tube completely. One other thing I'd like to see, in addition to a buff to the Elbing's main battery range from Wargaming, is I would love it if they took what they did on World of Warships PC and brought it to Legends. If you're not familiar with the changes in PC over the years, basically what they did is make it so none of your modules can be permanently blackout destroyed. They can only be temporarily disabled for a certain amount of time. And I'd like to see that brought over to Legends, because it's not good if you ever get your torpedo tubes or your main battery guns, or even your secondaries or AA guns completely destroyed. There's one class of ship in this game where none of its armaments can be completely destroyed, and that would be CVs, and also, I guess for that matter, hybrids. They just reload their planes after a set amount of time. They never lose access to the planes, but you in a surface ship, you can lose access to your main battery guns or your torpedo tubes for the duration of the battle. And I think that needs to be changed. That's not necessarily a complaint about CVs or hybrids. It is what it is. I just think for the overall health of the game moving forward, that is an idea for the balance department to strongly consider, along with a true buff to the Elbing, specifically to its main battery gun range, and I'd be fine with a concealment nerf to compensate for that. But a true buff as opposed to this indirect buff that Chuck, the French destroyer commander, provides you. It's nice, I just wish we could build into the range more, and ideally, I'd like to be running the reload mod, because that is the one bad thing about these guns. I think with this build, which is set up for max range using that range mod in the 4th slot, I want to say the reload time is a little over 6 seconds. It might be something like 6.4. I don't know if we're going to shoot again before this battle ends, though. We've got Aki pushing out. We've got this battleship attempting to sail in and, I don't know, sink himself. It's 463 to 415. I really don't know why this guy is pushing in. We have the win here as long as we survive. But if he goes down, I think we're pretty much toast. But only 12 seconds left, 10 seconds now. I don't actually think there's enough time for the Aki to fully finish him off. So even if he is trying to throw, I don't think he's going to succeed in that endeavor. No offense to him, but I don't know why you would do that. Anyway, the battle ends. We have 4 kills. Could have maybe gotten a crack in, but there was just no opportunity for that. Not late on in the battle. And the most important thing is that you win, which we do with 3,188 base XP. A lot of that, I think, comes from dealing damage to the enemy destroyers. And as you can see, the AP is quite effective against them, particularly if you can bump Chuck onto the inspiration slot. You might not have Rumble. If you don't, you can't really spec into full range, which is unfortunate. But if you do want a little bit of extra range on the Elbing, because like me, you think the main battery range is anemic, put Chuck in the inspiration slot on Eric Bai. You'll at least do a little bit more damage to destroyers, and you'll have a little bit of extra range. Hope you enjoyed the video. If so, give it a thumbs up. Consider subscribing if you haven't already, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.